Hello and welcome to UWO Now. I'm your host, Wendell Ray. We're happy to have you join us for another conversation with a member of our UWO community. Life after college comes without guarantees that you'll end up where you envisioned you'd be. Our guest today majored in journalism and did work in newspapers in Wisconsin and in New York, but now works in a space she probably did not predict. Jeni Asaba is Senior Manager, Community Engagement and Advocacy at JAMF in Minneapolis. She is also a UWO graduate and is our guest today on UWO Now. Jeni, thanks so much for being a guest with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
First of all, why don't you tell us what is JAMF? J-A-M-F.
Well, number one, it's a company that nobody can pronounce, not just, you asking the pronunciation, but we oversee Apple device management. So that means that if you have a lot of Apple devices, whether they're iOS or Mac OS in your environment, you may use our software to help manage those. So we are in commercial as well as education, healthcare, what have you.
And what are your current responsibilities at JAMF? I know your title is Senior Manager, Community Engagement and Advocacy. Tell us what exactly that means.
Yeah, so that means that I oversee community is the short way of putting it, because otherwise it's a long title. So my main responsibility is making sure that our customers, our partners feel more connected to each other and to JAMF in order for them to find more success in their roles. And success, as we know, for everybody can look different. For some, it just means more access to the materials that are going to help them in their particular roles. Maybe it's learning about the technical capabilities that are new with our feature sets. For others, it's connecting with other people who are doing their same role. And for predominantly the majority of our customer base, that's IT admins. So connecting them with folks all over the globe, whether it is in their industry, not in their industry, in their product line or not, in order to help them connect with others who they can learn from and really just kind of grow together on their JAMF journey.
So not quite like a professional organization, but kind of like that, maybe?
It depends on which community they're in. So under my umbrella, we have 3 different communities. We have a large public community, which is JAMF Nation. So anybody in the Apple admin space is well aware of that community. I also oversee customer advocacy and partner advocacy, which are much more, they're smaller, tighter knit communities. And those are really reserved for customers who really want deep engagement with our company and just kind of want that behind the scenes look at like, what is JAMF doing? How can I be involved in it? And how can I extend my reach as a customer in order to be more successful and just more connected as a whole? So it kind of depends on what somebody's individual wants or needs are. And then we plug them into the community that makes the most sense for them.
And how long have you been doing and operating in this particular area of community at JAMF and elsewhere?
Well, my first kind of step into it was really when I was asked to start our advocacy program, JAMF Heroes, and that was about 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, and it's just flown by since then.
Okay. You're listening to UWO Now. I'm Wendell Ray, and we're talking with UWO graduate Jeni Asaba, who is Senior Manager of Community Engagement and Advocacy at JAMF. That's JAMF in Minneapolis. So tell us about what happened post UWO. Okay, you are a UWO graduate. You're a journalism student, a journalism major. Had worked at the Advanced Titan here at UWO. All set to be a reporter, journalist in New York. That was your dream as a child. What happened? Tell us what happened once you graduated.
I started writing for a newspaper. I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, started writing for that local newspaper in middle school. So I knew from a very early age that was something that I wanted to do and then progressed. And yes, the dream, of course, as I think many journalism students have, is I want to be a reporter in New York City. Well, I graduated early from UWO and then I got married. So that was immediate out of the gate. And I should back that up. I got married a semester after I graduated because I had to wait for him to graduate. So right after graduation, while I was saying, come on, honey, hurry up, I worked at a local newspaper in Wisconsin, and I was working there waiting for that. The day after we got married, maybe this is too personal for you, Wendell, but
No, that's okay.
we drove out to the Bronx the next day.
Wow.
And
from Oshkosh?
We drove from La Crosse, Wisconsin, to the Bronx, to an apartment I hadn't seen before. I was just taking the leap of faith, if you will, when you're a newlywed, and all excited to start my experience in New York. And of course, I started looking for a reporting position because my love and my experience had been in newspaper reporting. And probably not surprising to anybody, they're kind of hard to come by because it's a competitive market. And this was back in 2006. So it was a little bit of a different landscape than it is now when we're talking print media. So it took me a year to find that first role. I did some other jobs in advocacy and in homelessness and hunger issues. I worked on at a local community college, which was really meaningful work. But I still I had that dream, right? I had that niche to get in. And a story for anybody who doubts themselves or is wondering if they should wait on, a process kind of coming true. I turned in a resume at the newspaper that I ended up working at a full year before they brought me in for an interview because they didn't have a position. And then when they did have a position, they had held on to my resume for that previous year. I got in, I ultimately got that job. So the dream of becoming a reporter in New York City did happen, and it was one of the best jobs of my career.
So what kind of stuff were you reporting on while you were in New York?
Well, if you can imagine, the Bronx is a pretty colorful place. So we had a small team of reporters. I believe there were about 4 of us when I was there, and it was everything from speed humps being installed, because depending on which neighborhood you're in the Bronx, they really, really care about their speed humps. So yes, I wrote a news story on that, to all of the political coverage of any races that were going on. I had one story about, he ended up being a criminal and being incarcerated, but he had a very colorful Subway shop that had another purpose in the evening. So I will just leave it at that.
I think we can understand what you're talking about. Go ahead.
It was here, there, everything in between. And it really went back to the incredible education that I got at UWO-Oshkosh, that I could lend myself to so many of those different types of stories. And we joked in our newsroom, back in the day, where this is kind of a good and bad thing, that whenever anybody died, they gave it to me, whether or not it was a notable person who, died of natural causes and they wanted a profile on that person. Or I wrote a story of this young man who was gunned down in the middle of the street, and I called and spoke with his family the very next day to share his story and who he was as a young man. So I think that it was partially just my personality and partially, again, that training that I got at UWO, that I could do that, whereas some of the other reporters didn't feel comfortable with it.
Why did you choose UWO to come and get an education all the way from La Crosse?
So fun story there, too. I actually first visited UWO when I was in middle school. We had at my middle school a science team that I was terrible at science, as probably a lot of journalism students are, I would guess. I was terrible at science, but I love being social. Again, probably goes to a lot of journalism students. I love being social. So I was a part of the science team, and UW-Oshkosh hosted this science day. I don't know what it's called, but they brought in middle school students from all over the state, whoever could make it, to compete against each other in this big science affair, if you will. Mm-hmm. That was my first time visiting UW-Oshkosh. I did terrible from a science perspective, but I returned home and I told my mom, that's where I'm going to go to college. And she, of course, I was in 7th or 8th grade and just kind of laughed. Oh, that's cute. I'm glad you had a good time. But then down the road, when I was actually looking into journalism programs and went and toured the campus, UWO was the number one choice. It had an outstanding, very recognizable program. It had a warm and friendly campus. It just felt right. So that ended up being my home for the next 3.5 years.
Yeah, and sounds like you made the most of it while you were here. You not just were a journalism major, but you also got involved in some activities while you were here. You weren't just a student, you were an active student. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I started getting involved right away. I was in Clemens Hall, which is no longer on campus. It was old then, and it has since been removed. Another story I'm sure many people can relate to. I was in student government, and I got involved in the AT, and I was a staff writer for the Advanced Titan. I later became an RA and was an RA, or do they call it a CA I can't remember, at Oshkosh. And I had residence in Fletcher Hall for a year and a half. So I always believed in being really invested and involved in whatever environment you are. I've done that throughout my entire career. It really started there at UWO-Oshkosh, and there were great opportunities to get involved.
Personally, you've been involved in starting nonprofits that have impacted many people. Well, tell us about what you've done, Jeni, so far in that space, and how and why you got involved in that. At what point in your career you decided to also get involved in the communities that you're working in?
So when I was at Bronx Community College, was my first job in New York City, and I ran an internship program at that time, and we focused on hunger and homelessness issues. That was something that mattered a lot to me. It was something that impacted the community. And part of that project was an idea to start collecting prom dresses and then giving them away to young women in need. And mind you, I've reminded my interns of this in the years since, but they thought it was a terrible idea.
Really?
And they're just like, oh yeah. They're like, Jeni, nobody in the Bronx is going to give you anything, is what they told me. Like, that's cute that you think this is going to work, but it's not going to. And I just have a very optimistic personality, and I'm like, no, let's give it a try. And they, okay, sure, let's prove her wrong. And so we started collecting prom dresses.
But why that area? Why did you decide to, venture off into that area in particular, prom dresses? What was it about that said, okay, we need to help some young ladies in this area?
I think part of it was it felt like it was an area that was wasted and shouldn't be, because it was so easy. I mean, if you think of women and how many dresses we collect over the years for being a bridesmaid or a fancy occasion or whatever, and you're probably not going to wear that dress more than once, maybe a couple of times, and then they sit in a closet. So it seemed like something that was fairly easy to collect that was also of high value. So if somebody needed to replace that item, they'd have to go spend $100 or more. And those prices have just increased over the years. So I think that was really kind of an initial idea. And also, Bronx Community College was really interesting in the fact that it had a high school on our college campus, which I've never seen before. Maybe they exist. But because we had those high schoolers right there in close proximity, it seemed like a really good match.
Okay. All right. So I interrupted you. Tell us about how you convinced folks in the Bronx then to donate these dresses.
Yeah, we started advertising. I got in contact with local media, put out a press release. I think it was really interesting to the media because they hadn't seen something like that done before. And I think they were probably curious, is this actually going to work? That first year we collected, I don't remember the exact number, it was around 200 to 250 in dresses, and I had them lined up in the perimeter of my office, and it was not, mind you, a very large office, so we got cozy. And then I invited over the girls from that local high school, and I remember they just sat in the hallway right outside my office, and then a few at a time they would go in, pick out some dresses, go in the bathroom, again, not ideal, but we made it work. And then if they found a dress that worked for them, they took that home. And it did work. I mean, we were able to get every girl that needed a dress at that high school a dress that year. And following that, when I had moved back to Minnesota a couple years later, I'm like, that program worked really well there. I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to formalize it as a nonprofit. And that became Project Prom. We started in 2007, and this was our final year this year, and we gave away over 800 dresses at this year's event. Yeah.
That's amazing. 800 dresses. That means you had folks donating dresses. in that quantity. That takes a lot of coordination. And you do this outside of JAMF, correct?
Yeah, it had been a side project, since 2007. We had over 4,000 dresses in inventory this year. So needing to make sure that we had, a big variety of colors, sizes, styles for girls to choose from. And yeah, the community rallied around it. I mean, they understand that prom is incredibly expensive. It doesn't need to be. So let's all just donate these dresses that can definitely dance another dance, if you will, and get them into the hands of some girls that could benefit from it. And it was a really, really fun event and very meaningful. And it was really cool to see it grow over that time period.
And, some people may be listening and thinking, prom, what's the big deal? But for some, the prom may be the only formal event they'll ever attend. And it is really important for a lot of young ladies and young men who want to attend, and it becomes a very special and meaningful event in their lives. So very nice that you were able to help so many to attend and feel good about what they had on when they went to this important event. I know there's another nonprofit we want to talk about, and I'm going to delay that just for a second. But so here's this journalist who's now kind of delving into a lot of community work and nonprofit work. Were you starting to feel like an itch to do more of that?
I think it's always been a part of me is just what can I give to give back? Because I feel like I have a roof over my head. I have food. I've got a car. I've got great kids, and not everybody has that. So that's always been in the back of my mind of just like, how can I give back to anybody who isn't as fortunate as me? And I think the smartest thing that anybody can do is say, where does my talent align with anything that I can do? And where does your passion align? I've spoken in the past a lot about just like, you need to have excitement for people to follow you in anything. If you're not passionate and if you're not excited about what you're doing, it's probably going to fall flat, because who wants to join something that somebody else is just doing in a lackluster kind of effort, right? So that's really where all of my work has aligned. Is it just opportunity presents itself in one way or another, and then I get excited, and then I'm like, let's make stuff happen, and people join in, and because they want it to happen too.
I mentioned that there are a lot of folks who don't find a college education maybe as beneficial as others. What do you think about your time at UWO, and why do you think having a college education was important, given the fact that you did pursue your major for a while, but ended up in a different space? And someone would say, well, you wasted your time at UWO then.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation these days about that topic. And I can tell you one thing, when I interviewed for that job at the newspaper in New York, there was a pretty well-known publisher who was part of my interview process. And he came in, and one of the first things he said was, "You're from the Midwest." He's like, "You're from Wisconsin. That means you're going to work hard." Like, it was kind of funny to me that there was this mentality that if you're from the Midwest, you work hard. And I'm like, I agree. And, so much of what I've done over my career, whether it's been in the journalism space or not, is based on the things that I learned in journalism school. I mean, going through law, going through the ethics course, going through editing. I mean, how many of us could use a little bit of teaching when it comes to writing and editing? These are skills that people can use in their everyday life all the time, and it helps you no matter what career you end up having. So I was just incredibly lucky and fortunate to get some outstanding professors. I still reference to this day with my team, Barb Benish being my editing instructor at UWO, going through an activity where we had 2,500 words it was a news article. And she said, "You're going to take that 2,500 words and get it down to 2,000. And at the time we're like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I have to cut out 500 words. Then she said, now you have to cut it down to 1,000. Ultimately, we had to get that story down to 250 words and not lose the main points of the story. So as somebody who did an internship at a TV station, that particular exercise came in very, very handy, because I was used to 600 word article, and they're like, nope, you get 15 seconds or you get 250 words, period. So There's a ton of different examples, but all of the things that you learn, I mean, they play out in so many ways that you can't predict moving forward in your career.
And you've been able to apply the various things that you learned, maybe in student government, in leadership roles, to the roles that you assumed later outside of a career as a reporter and a journalist. I would assume you were able to apply some of those lessons learned at JAMF in your current position.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that you learn in journalism is how do you build connections with people, and not superficial. Some people may be taught superficial. We were taught, how do you build a genuine connection with somebody, and how do you do it quickly? Because if you're being, somebody's being approached by a reporter, number one, they're probably going to be a little shy. They can be a little skittish. They can be a little weary. So knowing what your space is, knowing who your audience is, identifying your environment right out of the gate. I mean, those are things that you have to be trained on, and you really learn and kind of practice over time. Oh, who doesn't that benefit moving forward? So with my job in community, again, our focus is on relationship building. It's not on, hey, I'm going to create a community and milk that community for what I can get out of it to benefit JAMF. It's instead me identifying what are the needs of my community members by establishing really genuine relationships with them so I can deliver value to them. Mm-hmm. And those are things that you practice as a reporter. And a lot of it is learned. A lot of it can be just like second nature to somebody, depending on who they are. But I always go back to the stuff that I learned, because it really has helped me throughout various facets of my career.
Well, what made you want to jump the career lane, so to speak, from journalism to where you are now? Why did you decide to do that?
Have you ever had the hours of a newspaper reporter?
Actually, yes. I used to be a reporter, so I know what you mean.
There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, the work was amazing. Did I like getting told that there was a dead body in a trunk of a car at 5 p.m. on the busiest road in the Bronx on a Friday? No. That's not information that anybody wants to get. You don't want to hear that there's a fire at 9 p.m. however many hours away that you have to get to, right?
I'm laughing because I've received that call many times as a young reporter. It's the middle of January and you got to run and chase a fire truck somewhere halfway across town. So yeah, I get it. Okay. So this opportunity came across and you said, let me see if I can apply some of the skills that I developed over the years and learned at UWO and other places, and see if I can apply them here in this new career.
Yeah. So it really led me first in a turn that I didn't think I would take, but I moved from New York back to the Midwest, into Minnesota specifically, during the Great Recession. My husband and I kind of lovingly joke that we were moving while the recession hit. Gas was over $4 a gallon. It was October of 2018. It was a rough time. And at the time, we moved without jobs because, I don't know, Wendell, if you remember, you used to be able to do that. So we, being our optimistic selves, that was something we did. And then got to Minnesota, we're in the Great Recession, and there's no work anywhere. So it was time to reassess as a whole what I wanted to do. I did look at journalism jobs, but I also evaluated what I wanted my future to hold. And that was a family. That was a stable, predictable schedule, which I knew that I couldn't get. So I did know what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to keep writing, and I knew that I wanted to keep doing interviews and understanding people's stories. So that led me into copywriting, and I worked for a different technology company first in copywriting. And that really helped transition. I mean, I started JAMF as a copywriter. So being able to use, again, my writing and editing skills, interviewing skills to get into a copywriter position at JAMF that then led to community, which was not a job. It didn't exist when I was at UWO. So had I wanted to learn how to be a community manager, there was no way to do it back at that time. And that's, I think, also just has been fascinating when you think about what your plan is, what your goal is, and then again, like God laughs because you think
Right.
and then you end up in a totally different role, and that's where I'm at now.
So you have also something I believe in common with Oprah in that you also ventured into Uganda. Tell us about your time in Uganda, why you went to Uganda, and what has been the fruit of that labor.
So, studying at UWO, journalism student, the last place I ever thought I would end up was Uganda, East Africa. But love happens. So it was actually, I was kind of started by UWO also. So instead of going on a traditional spring break as a UWO student, we had a program at the Newman Center there where we did a non-conventional, or I'm not sure what they call it, but a spring break service trip. I ended up in Kentucky for 3 years during my time at UWO. And during that final spring break where we were rebuilding homes for the poor in Kentucky, I happened to meet my husband, who was there from a college from the Northeast. So they had colleges from all over the place. He happened to be there. Long story short, we get married. He's from Uganda. I end up in Uganda a couple years after our marriage and experienced the first very uncomfortable trip of my life being from, a smaller city in Wisconsin. And it changed me as a whole. I immediately said, what can we do? Because Uganda is one of the poorest countries in the world. The residents there live on an average of $2 a day, median income of $600 a year. It's a rough spot to be in. And I wanted to, again, going back to my roots, make a difference and figure out how I could do that. And we had done a few different things over the course of the last, now 17 years, but at the time, a shorter period of time, we had brought shoes one year. I actually at Jamf raised enough money to bring 100 pair of shoes. We put those on the feet of these adorable little kids in Uganda, and we had brought balls, soccer balls, and dolls and school supplies for them too. But it never felt like enough. So that is how our nonprofit Building for Bridget kind of began. Do you want me to share that story, or do you?
Yes, of course. And starting with the name, Building for Bridget. Tell us about the name and how you attached that name to this nonprofit.
During one of my first trips to Ghana, there was this adorable little girl named Bridget, who was my husband's cousin's child, so a relative, who lived at his grandmother's house. And the other kids, they would kind of shy away from me because a lot of them, for the first time, it was ever seeing somebody who had light colored skin. And some of them were actually afraid. They're like, who is this person? I am scared of her. Bridget was the opposite. Bridget came over. She climbed up on my lap. She was probably a year and a half old at the time. And she would follow me around. Didn't matter where I went. There was little Bridget. And she disobeyed all the rules. Ugandan kids were not supposed to speak to an adult unless you were spoken to first. They certainly weren't supposed to just come climb up on your lap. But she did all of that. Bridget had this fire in her, this spirit about her that was just really magical and very different. So when we were thinking of what to call our nonprofit, when we incorporated in 2019, I said, I want to build for Bridget. I want to build a school so that kids like her have an opportunity to have a successful future. And their light, that inner spirit that I love so much in her, doesn't go out. So that's where the name came from.
Okay, so you come up with this idea to help many of the young people in this community in Uganda by developing a school. Tell us about how that happened. That's not something you just do, right? Especially from the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, my husband, having grown up in that area, he always had the dream of building a school. And we had talked about it, laughed about it over the years of like, yeah, wouldn't that be great? But how the heck do you do that, especially from 65,000 miles away, or 6,500 miles away, I should say. So how do you do it from really far away? And it was on our trip in 2019. We had 2 sons at the time, and we went and did a family vacation and went back to Uganda. And it was on the airplane home that we looked at each other and we're like, We don't know how, but now's the time. We need to build a school because these kids need it. We had visited a school on that trip that looked kind of like a barn. And I would put it that probably most people in the Midwest wouldn't even think it was good enough for their livestock. So it was a rough situation. And we're just like, we have no idea how, but we're going to. We are going to build a school, and we're going to provide a safe, quality education for kids living in this village. And we got back to the United States and got connected with an attorney who set up our nonprofit for us, Building for Bridget, pro bono, which was incredible. And then we just started talking about it. And I am the fundraiser. I am not good at fundraising, but I'm like, you know what? Again, like if you're passionate about something and I think you're doing something really meaningful, people want to get behind that. And they did. And that allowed us to purchase 4 acres of land, to build a 7-building campus. And we have preschool through grade 5, currently 260 students, and we opened in February of this year. So it has been incredible to see the journey and actually get to the place where the dream has come true. It's not perfect yet. We definitely have a lot of stuff that we want to do moving forward to really finalize and advance the school and its offerings, but we're at a good spot. We're really excited about it.
That's fantastic. What was it like working with the government of Uganda, or did you have to work with the government of Uganda to get this school on up and running? Because for those who may not know, working with other governments is not like necessarily working with the government of your home country, the United States, or wherever you might be. Working in a foreign government, it's, there's different cultural things you got to understand, different rules and regulations, different leadership styles, all that. How was it working and to get this project off the ground and completed?
Yeah, I'll say the word is tricky.
Okay, that's diplomatic.
It was tricky. We have the benefit that my husband is, he's one of the most selfless people in the world, but he's really the genius behind making this happen, because not only did he draw all of the plans for what the school would be, he worked with all of the local government. He worked with the engineers remotely. I mean, he did all of this to make sure that it happened. And a lot of that is understanding culture as what you're speaking to, because Uganda is a very corrupt country that's had a really rough background. And knowing that means that you recognize that things don't exactly work in the same channels as they would in a developed nation. So understanding that some people may want bribes, or that a process is just going to be created in order to get more money. I mean, those are very real things that you have to work through. And it was, again, tricky. But I think through the right connections, through just very smart, strategic interactions, was able to show that we're going to do something that's incredibly beneficial for this community, and ultimately got it done. So it wasn't easy, but we got there.
And you're servicing how many young people now? Tell us about the school specifically, who's working there, and what ages we're talking about.
Yeah, so I should start with the fun fact of, when you talk about difficulties working with other governments, we were planning to open to grades kindergarten through 5, or our equivalent of grades kindergarten through 5. And right before we opened, I mean, within months, the Ugandan government said, oh, by the way, you can't open a school unless you have their equivalent of preschool. And we're like, oh, great. Okay, we didn't plan for that, but sure. So we hired some extra staff and converted one of our buildings that was going to be used for something else into the preschool classrooms. Luckily, we had built a big enough campus that we were able to accommodate. But over the course, we employed hundreds of people. And like I said before, work there is really scarce. We were able to provide living wages for people building this entire campus. We now have, at least a dozen people on staff as our teachers. We have cooks, we have security, we have admins. So real good jobs where folks can come in and really make a difference in that community. And again, preschool through grade 5 and approximately 260 students right now.
So it's supported by a nonprofit that you started. And is there any way that someone could support or help with a contribution or donation to your nonprofit? How could they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. People can always reach out to us at buildingforbridget@gmail.org or gmail.com, or they can go to our website, buildingforbridget.org. There's all the information. There's photos, there's videos of the school campus on there. Donations are what makes it happen. I mean, that at the end of the day, these people they're very low income. So when it comes to being able to even pay for a child's tuition, which we use to cover that of the expense of just the teachers, like it's really hard for them to do that. We also we're really proud that at the school, we provide 2 hot meals a day, because some of these kids, if they didn't eat at school, they wouldn't eat at all. And we provide uniforms. We've had generous donations from people in the past that each kid gets 2 uniforms, including a warm sweater. So again, like they have warm clothes. Some of these kids, it's the first time they ever had brand new clothes. So those are the things that when people support Building for Bridget, they're supporting these kids directly at the school. We're currently raising money to get our library staffed. So we just got an opportunity to get 3,000 books into our library, which is going to be incredible. That's going to cost us around $1,000 to get those 3,000 books into our library. So raising money for that. And we're working on getting technology too. So getting solar, getting electricity, and then hopefully some sort of technology so these kids can start learning on real tech so that they can compete in the real world when they move on to high school and college.
That's fantastic. You're doing a great job, Jeni. Thanks so much for being our guest here today on UWO Now.
Thank you so much for having me and for the time and the fondest of memories of UWO, and I can't wait to get back and see the campus soon.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to UWO Now. Remember to catch the latest episode of UWO Now. Go to our website, wrst.org, or you can also go to the UWO YouTube page, watch today's episode or past episodes of UWO Now. I'm Wendell Ray. Thanks so much for listening.